Okay, so we have hit Big Little Lies Season 2, Episode 2, Telltale Hearts. So this episode literally and metaphorically starts with a bang. And Celeste is driving. She's dozing off. We find out it's because she took Ambien at 2 in the morning when she could not fall asleep. So she hits into this guardrail, really just showing you how much more of a bad state Celeste is in even from the last episode. And to perfectly show then, when Maddie picks Celeste up, you see Bonnie on the side of the road walking like a zombie. And I love they're always able to sneak in humor without ruining the overall mood of the scene. Just like with Maddie saying, why are you walking in the middle of nowhere? And Bonnie's like, this isn't the middle of nowhere. It's clearly just a public road. And it was kind of a sad moment here because Maddie says to Celeste, like she was last episode, that Bonnie's clearly not well. It's time for her to get her daughter out of that woman's house. But you see Celeste is just looking at her, and Celeste is almost as bad as Bonnie right now. And it's like Madeline's kind of in denial about that because it's easier for her to admit that Bonnie's suffering than her best friend, Celeste. So it's like everyone's crumbling around Madeline in a way. And it's also gotta put some fear in her because she sees what this lie is doing to the other two. When is it going to come for her? So to me, this was Laura Dern's best episode to date in Big Little Lies. She killed it here. It starts off with her getting this great news that she's going to be on the cover of the biggest women's magazine in the United States. And just like that, you get this great news and all of a sudden the worst thing could happen where your husband's getting cuffed by the FBI. And what I thought really worked well in this episode as a whole, there was a lot of very realistic things happening here where you get the greatest news sometimes and something horrible happens right after. Or with the ways some lies were revealed this episode to people, it just comes out of nowhere when you least expect it. You're not planning it. And I think they kind of kept that going this whole episode, and that's why it felt very intense and shocking. But what's interesting, too, is when Gordon's cuffed, you see in the background there's a car watching Renata and Gordon, and now you know, again, it's this detective. And you'll see later on she's following Bonnie when she's driving. So she's got her eye on them, and again, I like how they're using her sparingly. And it's like this impending doom. So I like we get another showdown with Mary Louise and Madeline here. And Madeline kind of gets the winning punches. Where Mary Louise is like, what kind of emergency do you guys have? And Madeline's like, one that short people have. Alluding to the bullying she took from her last episode about being short. And you see that Mary Louise is like, you seek out the bully. You make friends with her. And Madeline takes this as her calling her a bully. But it's such a classic situation I think we've all been in where of course, someone who's a bully like Mary Louise is calling someone else a bully. That is what they do. So Corey here, co-worker of Jane, we as an audience get a better read on him now this episode where he is just completely out there and doesn't read social cues well. He's just blatantly straightforward and has some odd ways of going about things like setting up a practice date for a real date with Jane. And I love Jane's reaction here when she's just like, has anyone told you you're kind of strange? There is a really good chemistry between the two of them brewing here. Where I felt like last episode they kind of teased us because he came off more like a jerk, but this is clearly more flirting now. And he seems more likable here. But he says he's good at reading people, and he can't get a read on her, but he sees she's tolerant and friendly. Now, this part about not being able to get a read on her and that she's hard to read is a underlying theme going on in this episode where it shows up later on where Mary Louise says that Celeste is an enigma. So you're seeing now they're pointing out that this Monterey Five also has this issue of being very mysterious, hiding something, and they're very difficult to see what's really going on underneath the hood. And what I love this show's doing this season is it's dropping little themes in, but also hitting certain targets they want to hit, and this episode being about the kids' connections to the parents, and they touch base with all of them, which I thought really worked well here. And that's really tough to pull off because it could feel repetitive, but it just wasn't. Again, like the premiere keeping every scene having weight to it and feeling meaning. And you see now when Bonnie's talking to her daughter while she's driving her, the daughter's getting this sense of like, are you guys going to get a divorce? She sees something's wrong with her mom and her relationship with the dad. And this episode did a good job of showing you these kids can sense things, especially emotions. And you'll see that with the twins later on with Celeste, and you see it with Ziggy, with Jane. And it's impressive because honestly, notoriously, kids ruin shows. But these kids only add to it, and I think it adds a good part of this show that shows the effect adults' behavior has on kids. And it makes it interesting to see what turns out of these kids and who they become. Okay, so the best scene of this episode, arguably the best scene of the season so far, is when Celeste is in her therapy session and she is telling her therapist how every time she even thinks about dating somebody else, it's just not Perry. She's holding on to him And like the therapist said, she's still married to him in her head. So the therapist, amps up her approach here a bit and wants her to relive an abusive moment that happened to her at a Christmas party. And then amps up even more by telling her to replace herself with a close friend and insists it be Madeline. And this was just edited really well with showing Celeste and what she was feeling and matching it so well to the beats that Nicole Kidman's dropping there. But the biggest credit I gotta give to is just the unity on screen between these two. It's this amazing portrayal of client to therapist. And like, this is so convincing, and the chemistry between the two of them is incredible. And I wouldn't be shocked if in real life these actresses do not hang out or try to get to know each other too well to keep that kind of mystery that a therapist always has with their patient that they're always trying to break down. Because you feel that. And it was a beautiful scene with Nicole Kidman just screaming to stop it when she sees in her vision Perry hitting Madeline, but she can't do this about herself. It's this problem we have as humans where we're so good at counseling our friends and so nice to our friends and forgiving and seeing what's happening to them, but we can't see what we're doing to ourselves. We can't be good to ourselves. It's so tough, and this is just a great example of that. We're so hard on ourselves, and this includes Celeste. This is why people stay in abusive relationships, period. So it was a smart move to then jump to an Arrested Development type scene where we see Gordon now in the orange jumpsuit, and Renata comes and visits him at the jail. And we learn in this episode that Gordon committed security fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, messed up financially, gambled to even bet the ranch that they owned. He was betting on things that belonged to both of them. So that's also what's driving Renata nuts about this. But the best is her just saying, I cannot not be rich. This is a lot of rich people's biggest fear, losing everything they've earned. And especially for her, because she worked hard for it. This isn't a situation where the husband's paying the bills. They both make a lot of money. And she knows she can be independent, but now she feels screwed over because he just, not asking her permission, did things with her money as well, and now it's going to make them both broke. And when I'm saying about that fear of rich people, it's like that psychology someone has where they lose anything and everything in a minute, like a guy who jumps out of a building at Wall Street. It's an extreme example, but it's like, oh my God, they can't even like process going back to that other way, being broke. They can't. And there's some like super fast lines going on here that are very important, like, you see Renata's feeling Maddie and what happened, but she says she noticed that detective watching them when he was getting handcuffed, and that she believes the detective tipped the FBI, which definitely happened. And she mentions they took her laptop. So this is all in the detective's game plan here, finding any holes in these relationships to pull at to get to these women. So an important thing we learn here is that Mary Louise, this isn't her first rodeo losing a child. She lost her son Raymond when he was very young. And we learn that's Perry's brother, obviously. And that's important because if Mary Louise has been through this before, that changes a lot of things. She has an expectation now what happens from this, and it seems like she's learned from whatever that did to her and is like over aggressive to make sure that doesn't happen again. So as much as I've been praising this season so far, the next part was the toughest for me to judge and feel how I really thought about it. So we see both the twins are fighting outside, and Celeste goes to break it up, and Max swings at her, and then she pushes at him and says, no, you will not be like him. Something about this just felt way over the top, and I don't think it worked. I think it worked in the therapy session because I believe that would happen, but I don't know if that exact line said like that would happen right at that moment. It was just like too written and unnatural in a way. And that's not even towards Nicole Kidman. It's just the written line there just felt like the wrong thing that someone would actually say. It felt like that thought was already in her head ready to say it instead of something that would just naturally come out there. But again, if I keep watching the scene, it goes back and forth because I'm like, oh yeah, then it really does work. It's powerful. But then I'm like, this still just feels forced and a little cheesy, especially because it happens to be that line. It happens to be Mary Louise standing there seeing it. So a little happenstance for me, but I guess a lot of that this show is that. So that one just was so blatant with it. But this is big that Mary Louise saw this because this is just ammo for her to use against Celeste because she's obviously got a plot against all these girls and she needs anything. And just to say later on to somebody that shouldn't hear it that, oh yeah, I've seen Celeste herself hit people. How about her kid? That's not good. So we meet Bonnie's mom here. And she was brought in by Nathan because he does not know how to connect with his own wife. But there's some good writing here, especially with the mom calling Bonnie out now, saying basically that, yes, you're my daughter. I know you build walls. And you don't want people to read you, clearly because you married a man who doesn't read you. And you're in a town that doesn't get who you are. You're the outsider and you like it in a way. Again, still rounding out that theme of how you read people And now this one would be Bonnie electing and liking that people can't read her, even her own husband. So there's some really funny stuff going on here between her husband Nathan and Ed, Madeline's husband, because Nathan goes and has to tell Ed that he took up running for Bonnie. But it's like he seeks approval from Ed, and it's like this insecurity Nathan has that he's not as smart as Ed. And this is the man his ex-wife is with, and they couldn't be any more different, and he has to like get approval from him. It's wild. At the same time, he hates him, and then he bullies him again. He always struts his stuff to him, and then he's like, let's just fight here. And I always love Ed's reaction, so I love that they're like just these polar opposites always clashing heads, but there is something, at least that Nathan admires deep down about Ed that he'll never admit. I thought it was really funny at the courthouse with Renata, and imagining them asking for $1 million bail for Gordon. They're all laughing about it. And it's just like her worst fear of just losing all this money over something like this. I like that they flashed for that, and it was like a nightmare daydream. So now they're alluding to a lot of Bonnie's skeletons here in her past, and I like that they gave this episode a lot to her to get to understand her character more, because she's probably the one we learned the least about last season. Now she's very important to the plot, and they're giving her weight, and this goes through her mom. So we learn real quickly that her mom clearly was an alcoholic, and she's like, I'm only having one drink, and Bonnie's like, well, at least it's not 100. And also learn about the mom throughout the episode, we learned that she's into some weird, I don't know if you'd say it's like voodoo stuff or psychic stuff, but she's got this crystal she's putting on her. She says she's got visions, and there was those weird visions she had of drowning that she tells Bonnie about, and we see that cut to water really quick. I don't know if that's even alluding to her having psychic visions of it, but it's there, and obviously Bonnie's had a bad experience when her mom acts like this and doesn't want to hear any of it. So it's gonna be interesting when we learn more about that and why Bonnie's the way she is and what she's gone through. But her mom nails it on the head here at dinner and says to Nathan, like, look, you gotta pinpoint when she changed, obviously. And the mom knew it was the night of the murder and that she hasn't been the same, and she's like, it's PTSD. And she's right. And she gives that good motherly advice to Myra. It's like, look, you gotta snap out of this, because it's not working for your husband, it's not working for your child, and it's definitely not working for you. But you see, this is also important because now, obviously Nathan's such a dummy that he couldn't even pinpoint the exact day she changed, but now it's planted the seed in his head, and he gets it now, so you know he's gonna pinch at that. So then we learn even more about Celeste, because she has a flashback of when she's thinking about Perry and her on their first date. Perry's like, your mom passed away. You have no siblings as far as you know, and you don't talk to your dad, so she's got daddy issues as well. And he says the most creepy line, if this works out, I'm gonna have you all to myself. If that's not a red flag, I don't know what is. And it's interesting she's thinking about this now, because it's probably her regretting and going back like, man, I'm an idiot. Like, why did I not look into more of that line? And it shows you how much of a predator in a way Perry was, because, I mean, we've already seen him beat Celeste to a pulp and rape Jane, but this line just sums up his thinking. Like, oh, perfect. I don't have to deal with any people that would get in my way of owning you and possessing you. He knows this is something he can prey on. Scary stuff. So then this episode really ramps it up, and out of nowhere, when she snaps out of this daydream, Mary Louise comes in and informs her that the kids told her they have a brother in Ziggy. So again, what I loved about this, it's realistic in how secrets get out, and especially in a town like this where it just happens when you least expect it, and then it travels so fast where Celeste tells Madeline, Madeline tells Jane, and now Jane's got to talk to Ziggy about it. Just like that. And Shailene Woodley here really steps up to the plate in this scene, talking to Ziggy. Her best scene to date in this show, really showing her chops. Definitely even improved as an actress to me since season 1. I see a difference, just more in the moment here. And even season 1, I felt there were some moments where she looked like she was remembering some of her lines, but this, not the case. And the way she just portrays that thought process she's having of having to talk about this with her young kid, and then him dropping the bomb about assault, and he's saying it wrong because he doesn't know what assault is, and she's got to make the choice. Do I tell him this? Is he ready for this? Is this the right time? Do I keep this from my son any longer? And she explains it to him, and it's heavy-duty stuff. It's something people face, and there's really no right or wrong answer to something like this. You just go with it. So we get a very hard scene to pull off, but of course having Meryl Streep and Nicole Kidman together, and you can't do it any better with this scene where Mary Louise is asking about this affair. And she's like, this happened when you were trying to have a kid? So I called that one in the Flash last episode when she sees Perry with when they're getting an ultrasound and he had a scratch on his face. So yes, he had assaulted Jane during that time in their life. And Mary Louise is giving all the excuses in the book here because Celeste is hitting her with, like, it was rape. And she's like, oh, your friend could be lying. She could have been drugged, had multiple partners. It's like, what if she got it wrong? Aren't you desperate for her to be wrong? Aren't you desperate to believe he wasn't capable of doing these things? Which really gets you in the mindset of someone like Mary Louise. They can just lie to themselves better than anybody else. Talk about being as ignorant as possible and choosing to be. That is Mary Louise. And Celeste drops a bomb on her that he hit her. And she's like, then why didn't you go to the police? And then she's trying to call her out, saying like, oh, now you're telling me you guys loved each other and you had sex, but he beat you? Like, it doesn't make sense. She says, I don't believe it. It's not that she doesn't believe it. She doesn't want to believe it. So she's like, I want to go to the police to find things out. Which is bad news here for the Monterey Five. And Mary Louise is like, you left out the part that you found out about the affair 10 seconds before Perry died. And that's a big, big thing, because if there's anything this detective can use against them as probable cause, it's that information, and puts Celeste in a bad light. I like that they creatively made this affair a very important part in this investigation now in the plot, and how that all connects now to the murder. I like this quick scene they threw in with Jane and Celeste talking about Ziggy knowing, and Celeste not wanting Ziggy to know the violent part so he doesn't tell her kids that their dad was a monster. And it shows just a good way of, again, there's no right or wrong way to do this, and like Jane says, it's just an effed up situation. Like, you're both trying to protect your kid, you can't even hold it against each other. What do? It's just, there's nothing you can do. There was a bad scene to me in this one, though, where Madeline sees Bonnie. It's really rushed, and it's not a great line, where Bonnie says, I have a feeling it's gonna get us all. And Madeline's like, what? And then Bonnie's like, the lie. Come on. That feels like it's just written for a teaser. So I was laughing so hard how they shot the scene with Gordon and Renata in the car when she's driving him home. And he goes, you used to like that song. And she goes, I used to like to sit on your face too. Think that will happen again? I was crying my eyes out. And they nailed this scene, the two of them. And I love they decided to film this from behind them and not showing the front of their faces. It reminds me of my favorite comedy scene ever in Dumb and Dumber. When they're both in the van, it's from behind. It just makes it that funnier. And he's talking about the Rocky Mountains. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But it reminded me of that, and it works so well. And she wants to know just the reason for all of it. And he's like, a Florida Gulf Stream. And she hits him, and he's like, we're creatures of want. So this hampers back to Mary Louise saying that Madeline last episode was someone who just wants, and that this town is just full of people like that. And Gordon says Renata's even bigger of a wanter than him, and this makes her snap. And Laura Dern just really pulled me in here. It's just, I feel like I've seen couples fight like this, and it's just done so well. It's so believable. And it was so funny that she kicks him out of the car in the middle of the highway, points the finger, and she says this line, will someone give a woman a moment, because everyone's beeping at her. And then she immediately turns around to go back to get him, which is just perfect. And he's just standing, looking out. And his face when he comes back in the car is just, oh my, it was perfect. Nailed it, and it was directed so well. So props to that. That's how you forget sometimes the show is really funny as well. So what stunned me was them having Madeline and her daughter fighting. Abigail slips up and brings up Madeline's affair, and Ed hears it. This shocked me because this was really early for this to happen. We had a lot of reveals already in this episode. So many secrets found out, and then this too. So it felt like it was piling on here. This feels like it's a result of this only being 7 episodes, and they're trying to get a lot in. It's really ramping it up now. I still think this is one of those shows that can pull this off, because again, this is just how stuff gets found out, and it can just go like that. So in the realm of this show, it can pass, but I do feel like it's still just too soon, and I wasn't so crazy about how it was revealed, especially for something like that we've had so much weight built for that reveal. And it was just through a kitchen conversation. In the same episode, we had other things already revealed, so I felt like that was just something that deserved a bigger moment than just be thrown on as a cherry on the top here. But it's a polarizing approach, because I think some people will hate that they did and some people will love it. So to each his own on that one. But nice hair, Abigail, doing that. Come on. So then we get to see now Madeline and Ed talk about this. Madeline's obviously feels terrible about it, saying it's a me thing, not him, that she still loves him. They should go to couples therapy. But he's now got 2 things that are hitting him, so there's no way he's even going to listen to any of this, because he's like, look, I've already found out today you didn't tell me about Ziggy, and then this. So it just is feeding into his thoughts already, and fears that he's an outsider in her life in general and doesn't feel like they're a team. And he's crushed, and rightfully so, and he's like, we're done. Adam Scott hasn't missed a beat in this show, but I think his delivery of the line, we're done, was bad. Again, it's me nitpicking, but I'm just saying what I see. Otherwise, he's been great. Just felt robotic and off. Interesting line the mom says to Bonnie here at the end, "What have you done this time?" So Bonnie's done something in her past we don't know about, which would be interesting. I love when they have characters like that where you're uncovering them slowly. And I like they had a cute moment here where Bonnie's daughter sees now Bonnie sitting on Nathan's lap. They're bonding finally, and it like gives the kiddies. It shows so well to show how everything affects kids. That even the relationships, when you don't even know they're watching, is affecting them. And it was really nice to have Ziggy and the kids hang out. It worked well too because it was a nice moment for Celeste and Jane, who just been through so much. This information that got out that they were worried about with Ziggy, they're making the best of it. And there's a lot of love there. It's really cool. And it just beautifully transitions now to someone who's probably having the worst day of their life now, which is Madeline, looking out at the ocean. And it perfectly ends with the song Ed sang in the finale, "The Wonder of You" by Elvis. So heartbreaking stuff for Madeline. So this episode was super packed with stuff. It ramped up. Anyone was complaining about last episode being slow, you got the complete opposite where this was super fast. It's very exciting though. It's gonna feel like this also because again it's only 7 episodes, but it's tightly weaved together. It works, and the acting's just a joy to watch. Everyone's just killing it here. And again, I can't stop thinking about that Nicole Kidman scene in therapy. That was something else. And this episode left me really excited for things to come, and I think they're doing the best they can with a script post-book. They're just planting a lot of seeds that make sense and can only lead, I'm certain, to exciting stuff. Only complaint I'd have here is that they just kind of revealed maybe a little too much, especially how they did the Madeline affair reveal. But we'll see how things play out. I'm excited for things to come. I'm going to give this episode a 9.3. Let me know what you thought of it down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I read every comment and try to respond as many as I can. Please subscribe so you don't miss one of my reviews of Big Little Lies. I also do celebrity interviews, and I am also reviewing Handmaid's Tale at the moment, so check those out as well. Please follow me at SteveVarley1 on Twitter and Instagram for more of me, and I'll see you next time.